Hey guys, how you going? In this video I'm going to be showing you how to create this custom form right here from scratch using plain HTML, CSS and just a tiny bit of JavaScript for the error messages such as this one right here. So essentially this is going to be a responsive and also mobile friendly custom form, and it's going to support 5 different types of input fields. We can see here I've got a plain text field, we've got numeric field, something like this, we have a date or date time field, which is going to use the browser's built-in date picker because I prefer simplicity and not every single date picker needs to be custom. We've also got here a text area for some multi-line text, and finally we've got a drop-down menu. I'm also going to be showing you how to create this style of button for the submit or the sign up or whatever your form is being used for. Obviously I'm using sign up as an example, but this form can be used for any purpose and not just sign ups. So I'm going to be showing you now how it's responsive. So if I was to resize this window, we can see it is going to shrink down according to the window size, and the same goes for the mobile device. If I go into mobile view, we can see once again it is going to shrink down to support the mobile device. Okay, so and one last thing, if you don't like any part of this form, you can easily customize it and change it to your liking, because the source code for this is going to be really straightforward and easy to understand. So let's go inside this tab right here. We're going to start from scratch from an empty HTML file and create that form design. So let's go inside the text editor right here. We can see my directory structure is really straightforward. I've got one index.html file. Inside here, it is a basic HTML skeleton with the head and the body. So first, we can make a new directory to hold all of the form design files. So we can make this directory and call it something like form, for example. Inside here, we can make a new file and call this one form.css, which is of course going to hold all of the CSS styling for the custom form. We can make another file and call this one form.js to hold the tiny bit of JavaScript to get the error messages working when needed. So now we have these two files. We can then of course include them inside the HTML. So I'm going to go inside the head here and firstly link the CSS style sheet. So of course form/form.css, and do the same thing down here for the JavaScript. So of course script source, and then that's going to go to form/form.js. So now we've included both the JS and also the CSS file for the custom form design. So I'm going to be showing you how to do this essentially component by component. So we're going to be building the HTML for a particular section, and then we're going to be styling it as we go. So firstly here, let's go inside the body. Actually, I might just go inside the head here and just add a bit of padding around the borders of the web page just for stylistic purposes. So I'm going to say style and say body and add some padding just so the actual form design we're working on doesn't touch right against the edges of the web browser. So that's going to make it a bit clearer for us to see what we're actually doing. So now let's begin on the actual custom form itself. So firstly here, we can make a new form HTML element. We're going to set the action to be the exact same page as we are currently on. So // for that one right there. And for the method, I'm going to make this a post request, but of course you can make these methods whatever you like. It is not relevant for this tutorial. But what is relevant though is adding a class of form. So I'm going to say class and make this form. This is basically going to allow us to only style the forms that have the class of form, because honestly you don't want every single form on your web page to have the same styling or be affected by these styles, but only the ones that you specify. So a class of form there is definitely important so we can actually style this form. So now we can just create 2 more elements here. We're going to specify the form title and also the form description. So now I'm going to make a new div here and call this form__title. So as usual on my channel, I'm using the block element modifier, CSS naming convention, but you can of course name these classes whatever you like. So for the form title, we can say the title is going to be sign up just like that. Okay. And for the paragraph description, we can make a new p tag with a class of form underscore underscore desk for form description. Inside here, we can say something like, I might just put some dummy text right there for the form description. Okay, so now I'm going to save this and refresh the browser, and we see we get something like this. So now we can apply some CSS styles to, of course, the form title and also the form description. So let's go back inside here and go inside the CSS file, and we can begin on the actual form itself. So firstly, we're going to start on the form element itself. So we can target the class of form and give it a font family of sans serif just for now. Later on, I'm going to be showing you how to import a custom font, but for now, we can make it sans serif. We can also set the font size to be 16px, and that's going to be our base font size for the entire form across the board. Okay, so now we can go down here and we can target every single element that is within the form. So we can say form and then an asterisk to achieve that. For this, we're going to say box sizing and make the box sizing equal to border box. This is going to help us create consistent CSS styles without the hassle of worrying about padding and borders and things like that. We can also set a line height to be 1.5. Personally, I believe that line height is pretty crucial in terms of readability and making things look a bit nicer. So definitely a line height of 1.5 for every single element inside the form. We can now come down and actually style the form title. So I can say form underscore underscore title. For the title, we're going to say font size and make this 2em. So 2em just means 2 times the current font size, and the current font size is of course 16px because form title is a child of form. So here we're going to have 16 times 2, so 32 pixels for the font size. The reason for the EM, relative unit, is because if I was to change this font size, then also the form title is going to change. So definitely have a relative unit for your form title. Also, we're going to set a font weight to be 600. Now, in terms of the sans serif font, it may or may not, most likely not, support a font weight of 600, but the custom font we'll be including later is going to support this 600 font weight. So this is more for later on, but I'm going to put it here just for now. Okay, we can then we can leave out the CSS for the form description because things like the line height and also the font size and font family here already cover the essential styles for the form description. So I'm going to save this and then refresh the browser here, and we get this result. So looking not too bad. We can see that of course this is bolded, and also we can see that the line height is having a positive effect on the readability of that paragraph. Okay, so now we can move on to each one of these form items themselves. So essentially, the way it's going to work is each one of these fields has 3 main components. Okay, it has got the actual label, it has got the input field, and it's also got the error message down here. So 3 main components for each one of these form items. Okay, so with that being said, let's go back inside the index.html and write out the HTML for one form item. So down here, just below the description, we can make a new div with a class of form underscore underscore item. Okay, inside here, we can specify our 3 main components. So firstly, we can make a new label with a class of form underscore underscore label. Okay, now for the for attribute, we can make this something like given name. Now this value here, given name, needs to match the ID of the input field in order for the label to work correctly. So firstly, let's go inside here and say given names as the label title. So for the input field, I'm going to firstly be showing you the input type of text. So we can say input right here with a class of form underscore underscore input. We can see also the type of text has been automatically inserted by Visual Studio Code. So we have here class form input. We can then say name and make the name given name. Actually, it needs to be, yeah, that's fine. So given name as the name. Actually, now let's go ahead and make this given names to make it plural. Okay, so that's more accurate to the label. So name given names for both this and also this one right here, and also the ID of given names just like that. So once again, the label for attribute needs to match the ID of the input field, so that when you click on the label, this thing will get focused. Okay, and finally here for the input type text, we can add a placeholder. So we can say placeholder equal to enter your given name. Now, during my research of HTML forms, I find that the label gives you a brief description of what the actual form is supposed to contain, but the placeholder gives you a more detailed description of what the user actually needs to do. Maybe things like maximum characters or a range of characters, things like that. But for this one, we can just say enter your given names. Cool, so now we can do some work on the actual error message. So these are going to work in the form of span tags. So we can make a new span right here with a class of form __ error. Inside here, we can say something like a sample error message. Just for now, of course, you're going to be changing this to suit your own needs. I'm now going to save this and refresh the browser, and we can see right here we get this. So now we're going to be using a flexbox to make each one of these three components on its own row. So back inside the CSS, we can begin work on the form item class. So we can say right here, class of form __ item. So remember, this right here is going to be one main container containing the three different types of elements: the label, the input, and also the error message. So firstly, we can say here, display and make this flex, and then we can say flex direction and make this column. The reason for the flex box here is because we want to try and avoid the use of break tags. So essentially doing BR just like this to create the three different rows, might be okay for you, in your scenario. But personally, I prefer to, keep that sort of thing in CSS. So definitely going to be using a flexbox to achieve the same thing without the need for this break tag at the end of each element. Okay, so get rid of that and go back inside the CSS, and we can also add a form __ item, and then say every single descendant or direct child of the form item. So just like that, we can say align self and make this flex start. And I'll show you right now what this property is doing. So I'm going to save this here and then refresh the browser. We can see that the flexbox has given us our 3-row layouts. Okay, and if I was to inspect the label, for example, we can see that the width of the label is 96.93 pixels. So the width right here is matching the width of the content inside the label. That is due to the align self property. If I was to remove this property right here, okay, so down here, we can see firstly, obviously, that the input form has gone all the way to the maximum width, but also the label is full width as well as the error message. So this align self is going to fix that problem and make them all the width of their content. Okay, so now we can go back and style the form label. So back inside here, let's target the class of form __ label. For this one, we can say once again font weight and make this 600. Of course, you can use bold instead if you wish. For some padding, we're going to say padding and make this 10px top and bottom and 0 for the left and right. Save this, refresh, and we get this right here. Not too bad so far. So now for one of the main chunks of this video, and that is going to be the form inputs themselves. So for these ones, there's going to be quite a few CSS styles, and most if not all of these properties are going to be used across all the different types of input elements. Okay, so let's go back inside here and target the form __ input class. For this, we're going to say firstly dash WebKit appearance and make this none. This right here is going to remove the default CSS styling that gets applied on iOS or Safari web browsers. So essentially, having this property is going to make your design consistent across all of the web browsers. So very important, this one right here. Also, a width of 100% and a max width of 425 pixels. So essentially, these two properties right here means that the input element is going to always try to be 100% with a maximum of 425. So basically 425 pixels in width or less. And these two properties also make the form inputs responsive. Okay, so now we can go down here and we can say fix for Safari/iOS date fields. So I found out that when I was doing this design and testing it, that the actual input type of date fields don't have the same height as the other fields on Safari and iOS if you don't choose a value. So this right here is a hack or a just a little fix for that problem. So it's going to be min-height. We can make this calc 0.9 em plus 0.8 em times 2 plus 0.6. Now obviously you may want to grab an iPad or an iOS device and test this yourself and create a different solution, but for me this right here has fixed that problem. Essentially it's just adding a minimum height for this field so that on page load the date fields don't actually have a small height. Okay, and I got these numbers right here, 0.9 and 0.8, from the padding I'm going to add right now. So we can say padding 0.8 and font size 0.9. Okay, so here we are. Obviously I'm going to be using the font size right here for the calculation. So I'm setting the minimum height based on the current font size plus the top and bottom padding, so times 2 top and bottom, and then plus 0.6 em. This just finished it off and it looks quite nice and it's working properly. So definitely not the prettiest thing, but it definitely fixes things when using date fields on iOS devices. Okay, cool. So now we can set a font family, and once again we're going to make this sans serif, but we're going to be changing this later on to the custom font. We can then say outline and make the outline of none. This will remove the default blue border that is around input fields on typically mobile devices. We can say border and make this 1px solid, and then just a light grey, so triple D's down here. Okay, and also a border radius, make this 4px, looks quite nice like that. And we can also say background here and make the background a really light grey. So F9, F9 and F9. Okay, we can also set a transition and we can make this background at 0.25 seconds, border color at 0.25 seconds, and also color at 0.25 seconds. So essentially this transition property is going to enable a nice smooth transition or animation when these CSS properties change, so background, border color, and also the color. And this right here is going to be useful for displaying error messages to create a nice smooth animation for the colors. I'm going to save this here and refresh, and we can see we get this right here. So not looking too bad even with the default sans serif font. So now we can move on to the focus and also the placeholder for the input fields. So back inside here, let's say form input, and we can target the focus pseudo class. So essentially when the user is actually typing inside the input field, we want it to look a bit different. So we can say background and make this just a white. So different from the very light grey by default. So save this and refresh, and we can see if I was to focus this field, so click on it, it changes to a nice white background with that nice smooth transition which we set earlier. We can now change the styling on the placeholder text right here. So back in the CSS, we can just say form underscore underscore input and then colon colon placeholder. This will target the placeholder pseudo element. So we can just say right here color and make it just a light gray, although a bit darker than the actual default background color right here. So save this and refresh, and now we can see the placeholder text color is slightly lighter, and this will create consistency across all of the web browsers. So now we can move on to the actual error message and also the error message styling for the input fields themselves. So basically this right here and also this right here. So firstly, for the error messages or error styling on the input fields themselves, it's going to be done with a separate CSS class to essentially tag that input field as being in error state. Okay, so back inside the HTML, let's add a separate class to this input field. We're going to say form input -- error. So now, of course, the JavaScript code, when the response comes back from the server for whatever the form input was submitted for, of course, that right there, that JavaScript or the page submit is going to set these classes. Okay, so when this has a state of error, let's go back in the CSS and target that class. We're going to say form input -- error. For this, we can set a text color to be a darkish red. We're going to say hash d5 and then 000 that's it. So D and then 50,000. Okay, we can set a background of a light red, so hash 5558F8, and a border color as the same as the text color. So once again, hash D5000. Okay, so copy this and paste it right there. I'm going to save this and refresh, and we can see right here we have, of course, the error styling for the form input. Okay, and also we need to actually style the placeholder. So we can just say for this, we can say form input error. Once again, colon colon placeholder. We can make this just a slightly lighter red than the background color, and this will be hash FFBFBF. Save this, refresh, and now we can see the placeholder text is now a light red. Okay, so now we can move on to the actual error message itself, this one right here. So for this, let's go back in here and we can say form underscore underscore error. We can set a padding top to be 10 pixels, add some space between the error message and also the input field. We can set the color to be the same color, so D50,000 as these two right here. Okay, a font size of 0.9 EM, so a slightly smaller font size than the actual base font size of 16 px, and also a visibility of hidden by default. Okay, we're going to comment this out just for now so we can see our progress. I'm going to save this here and refresh, and we get this right here. So now we only want this error message to appear visible when this field has an error. So for that, we're going to be using CSS to achieve that. So essentially, we want to only display this field when this one is in a state of error. Okay, so back inside the inside the CSS, we can go down here and we can say form input -- error. Okay, so targeting first the actual input field itself with a state of error. Okay, we can say plus, then form underscore underscore error. So this right here is the CSS adjacent sibling combinator, and it's basically saying I want to target the next sibling with this class from this one right here. Inside here, we're going to say visibility and make this visible. So I'm going to explain this further. So back inside the index HTML, we can see here we have, of course, the input right here with a class of form input error, and also, of course, the form error span tag down here. So these two elements have the same parent, which means they are siblings. Okay, so this span tag, right, with this class is the next sibling after this input with a class of form input error. So with that being said, back inside here, we're targeting the next sibling with this class from this one right here and making it visible only when this one actually exists. Okay, so let's set this to visibility hidden by default and see if this one actually applies. Save this and refresh, and now we can see it remains on. Okay, if I was to remove this form input error class from the text input itself, okay, press enter, we can see both of them go away. So it definitely makes it easier for you to add and display those error messages inside the JavaScript. Okay, so now we are essentially all done with the base styling for the input fields. So now essentially the rest of these fields are going to inherit the same styling from the one we just did. So with that being said, let's go back inside the index.html and include the new input type of number. So back inside here, let's just duplicate these 5 lines. So make a new form item for the input type of number. So for this, we can set the for attribute to be something like num users. Okay, and this is going to apply across the for, the name, and also the ID right there. Okay, we can then say for the label, we can say number of users. Alrighty, we can set the input type to be number. So input type number, just like that. I might also just remove this form input error class from both of these fields. So just backspace that right there. Okay, so input type number with a class of form input, the same one used previously for the input type of text. As I said, all of these inputs are going to use this same class to apply universal styling and also code reuse. We can also just set a minimum and maximum for the input type number. So we can say min and make this 1, for example, and also max and make this 5, for example. And for the placeholder, we can just say something like, you know, how many users, and then max 5. So once again, adding more detail compared to the label inside the placeholder text. And for the error message, we can keep this as is, a sample error message. I'm going to save this here and refresh, and we can see it's working perfectly fine just like that. We can see that the maximum value is working perfectly fine. I can't go higher than 5. Of course, this right here is just client-side validation. Don't rely on this for actual validation on the server side. You may have also noticed that inside the demonstration, this field right here is a tiny bit smaller. So to achieve that, we're going to be using a modifier CSS class. So back inside here, let's add a new class to this form input. We're going to say form __ input -- small. Okay, so now with this class, it's a CSS, it's a block element modifier class, and inside the CSS, we can just copy this and add some styling to that class. So form input small, we can say max width and change this to be 250px down from the 425px set by this one right here. Save this and refresh, and now we get a smaller width for the numeric field. Obviously this is completely optional. I just think that obviously a number is going to be smaller than an actual text field, so maybe you can actually just make that a bit smaller. Okay, so now let's add some HTML for the input type of date. So back inside here, we can just copy this once again, and we can change these values. So the for and the name and the ID, we can make this expiry date, for example. The label can be once again expiration date. Okay, we're going to make this an input type of date. We're going to keep this form input small for the date field, and we are going to just remove the min and the max attributes because we don't need those for the date field. For the placeholder, once again, just a bit more detail. We're going to say enter and expiration date. save this and then refresh, and we get this result right here. Now, if you do have an iPad or an iOS device lying around, open up Safari and go inside here and just remove this line of code and see what the date field looks like. In my experience, the date field, just like this with no value, is going to be a much smaller height compared to these ones right here. And of course, as I said earlier, this CSS property is supposed to fix that problem. Okay, so now let's move on to adding the text area to the HTML. So for this, we can once again just copy this line, and we can just remove this input field because, of course, a text area is a text area and not an input field. Okay, for the label, we can say message, and inside here, we can just say message, the same thing. Okay, we can then put a text area. Alrighty, remove these cols and rows, and set the name and ID to the same as the 4 attributes. So of course, message right there. So message, message, and then message. Let's give it a class of, once again, form input. Okay, and a placeholder. So placeholder. Enter a detailed message about why you wish to sign up. And also, once again, as usual, adding a bit more detail, so max 500 characters. Along with this, we can also set a max length on this text area. You can say max length and make this 500 to, of course, suit the placeholder text. I'm going to save this and refresh, and we can see it's looking not bad so far. However, we do need to apply 2 specific styles just for the text area, and that's going to be for the resize. So we want to actually disable this resize ability, and also a maximum height. Of course, you can of course keep this resize ability if you wish to. Okay, so back inside the CSS, let's go and target the text area with a class of form input. So we can say right here, text area dot form underscore underscore input. So of course, targeting every single text area with this particular class. And also just heads up, this is actually, I believe, it is going against the rules of the block element modifier naming convention. So obviously try not to do this, but I think in this case right here, it is perfectly fine. So we're going to say resize and make this none, and set the minimum height to be 200 pixels right there. I'm going to save this now and refresh, and now we can see that the resize ability has been removed, and also the height is locked to 200 pixels. Okay, so that is all for the actual input fields themselves. We can now move on to the sign up or the actual form submit button, and also the tiny bit of JavaScript for the error messages. So inside here, let's just go in the HTML and add the HTML for the submit button. So we can say right here, a new div with a class of form item. So reusing the same class as we did previously. And inside here, we can make a new button with a class of form underscore underscore btn, or form button. A type of submit will ensure this right here is going to actually submit the HTML form. We can then say sign up or continue as the button message. So saving this and refreshing gives us this right here. So now let's add some really basic CSS to customize and make it look something like this. Okay, so inside the CSS, let's target the form button class. We're going to say firstly a font family of sans serif. Once again, we're going to be changing this later on to a custom font. We can say font weight and make this bold. You know what? Let's make it 600 to match the previous styles. A font size of 1.1 EM, so a slightly larger font size than the rest of the form. A padding of 10px top and bottom and 16px for the left and right. A margin of 10px top and bottom and 0 left and right, just to add some space between, of course, the button and also the error message from above. A color or a text color of white. Okay, white against a green background. So I'm going to say background here and make this hash 14 B6 and then 4A. Okay, a border of 2px solid, and I believe there's a darker green, so 0f A942. So slightly darker than this one right here. And finally, a border radius of 5px to finish off the borders and colors for this button. We can then say cursor and make it a pointer, and also an outline of none. This is also going to, of course, remove the default blue outline on many mobile devices. So saving this and refreshing gives us this right here. Okay, so finally we can add the active pseudo class styling when you actually press on this button to change the background color to a slightly darker green. We can do this by saying form button, the form underscore button, and then active. We can make this background and make this 0 F A94 and then 2. So the same color as the border color for the button. Saving this and refreshing and then zooming in on the actual button, we can see it turns to a slightly darker green when you press on the button. Okay, cool. So now we can add the custom font. So for this, we're going to be using, as usual, Google Fonts. So head to fonts.google.com. Okay, inside here, you can go ahead and you can pick your font. So just keep in mind that in my example, I'm using the 600 font weight quite frequently. So I'm going to be choosing a font with support for this 600 font weight and also a sans serif font. So back inside here, you want to go to categories and make this sans serif for, of course, sans serif fonts. And font properties here, we can see number of styles. To try and get that 600, you want to make sure something like, I think, 8 plus should in most cases cover the 600 font weight. Okay, maybe something like 10 to be extra safe, to be honest. So 10 plus for that 600 font weight. If you don't care about 600 and you just want normal and bold, then of course make this something like 8 should be okay. But anyway, I'm going to choose here the font of Source Sans Pro, and just press plus right here once I've chosen it. Then go inside here and then press customize. We can see here we can choose the different styles that this font has. As I said, I'm using 400, so normal, and also 600. So I'm going to say regular 400 italic, and then semi-bold 600, and then semi-bold 600 italic. Okay, so now I'm going to load these 4 different fonts inside the web page. So back inside the embed, I can just say import right here and copy and paste this CSS import line. Copy this, go back inside the CSS, okay, and I can say right here, just paste that up the top. And now for all of my sans serif occurrences, so copy this and go inside find and replace. I'm going to replace sans serif with Source Sans Pro and then comma sans serif. So now I'm going to be using, of course, this font across the board for my custom form. Okay, and also to get this syntax or this name back inside Google Fonts, it tells you what the actual CSS should be just down here. Okay, cool. So now we've loaded the font. Of course, choose your own font to your own liking. So now refresh this and it works perfectly fine. We get a nice font for the custom form. So finally here, we're going to be adding the JavaScript to handle the error messages. So let's go back inside here and go inside the form.js file. So for this one, the main focus of this video is going to be how to, of course, create the custom form inside of HTML and CSS. So I'm not going to be showing you how to actually perform validation and actually display those error messages, but I am going to be showing you how to hide the error message once you have actually started clicking and typing inside the input field. So basically, let's go back inside the example. We can see here with this message, if I was to actually change this field here, we can see it goes away. and that of course gives the user a chance to change their actual value. So I'm going to be showing you how to do this in this video, but I won't be showing you how to actually include and display those error messages with JavaScript. Of course, it's going to be implementation specific and independent, so your code is going to look different to mine when it comes to displaying those error messages. But if you guys do want to see a video on that, please let me know. So anyway, let's go back inside the JavaScript, and we're going to say this. We're going to say document.addEventListener. We're going to say DOM content loaded. So once all of the HTML has loaded on the actual web page itself, we're going to run this function right here. We're going to say once again document.querySelectorAll. We're going to select all of the class of form __ input, and we're going to say for each one of those inputs, okay, we're going to grab the input inside the function. So this right here representing a single input with this class, okay, and we are going to say input.addEventListener. When the actual input field gets different input, so input right there, okay, we're going to run this function, and we're going to say essentially this.className is equal to this.className.replace. We're going to say form __ input -- error, and then a space and then a question mark. So this right here is of course a regular expression. Essentially, we're going to be replacing the class of form input error with nothing. We're going to be removing the form input error class when the input field gets input. And of course here, this refers to the input. In fact, I can make this set to input for a bit more clarity. Okay, so essentially removing this class when the input gets input. Okay, then we can say right here, comma, and then put an empty string. So replacing that with nothing. Okay, and this right here, this question mark is basically saying that this space is optional. So let's go back inside here. If I was to have the form input error like this, so form __ input -- error like this, we can see we've got a space here, okay, between this class and this class. So essentially, this question mark is going to say this space is optional. This is opposed to having the form input error on the end, something like this, with no space between the actual class name and also the end of the string. Okay, so now I might just save this and then refresh, and we can see we have no changes. Okay, but now if I was to add the input type of error to this particular field, so form input -- error, then go inside here and make some input, something like this, we can see it now goes away. So that is all for this video on creating a custom form using plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I'm going to be leaving the source code for this in the description, so definitely check that out if you wish to. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.